So, hey Capricorn, my name is Chris, and this is your beautiful reading for whenever you freaking find it in 2026. And I'm not doing the card cross, I'm doing 10 cards and I'm going to relate them however the freak spirit inspires me to do. Welcome. And this is the star card, and it's the 9 of Wands, coming out of your shell and receiving your blessing. You appear here as the wounded warrior, but there's the star card knocking at your little wall that you build around yourself to protect yourself because you kind of got hurt in the past. Oh yes, there's the devil and there's the Knight of Cups. So you're moving on from some shady, devilish energy. So that energy brought you into this 9 of Wands frequency, right? Trying to protect yourself, being the wounded warrior. But you're moving on from that. You're following your passion. You're doing what you love to do. Page of Cups, that's a spiritual journey, but we're going to see what else comes up. And there's the star card, let's not forget that. So fortune after difficult vibes, that's kind of, that's the Hangman and the 10 of Pentacles. Wow, okay. So you've been through a lot. There is the 10 of Cups, the 10 of Pentacles actually, wealth, abundance and prosperity. Star card, but that 10 of Pentacles is definitively connected to that Knight of Cups. So it's very important that we do something that we love to do, not just 10 years down the road, eventually maybe it will pay off. No, it has to pay off right now, just by the sheer joy that you experience while you're doing it. That's pretty much the Knight of Cups. And you know, you've been dealing with shadow aspects, I would say. That's for sure, right? The devil, the Hangman, and the 9 of Wands. That's heavy, heavy energy. But the star card on the 10 of Pentacles and the Knight of Cups is beautiful energy. There's the Knight of Swords and the 7 of Pentacles. 7 of Pentacles to the 10 of Pentacles, 6, 8. 2 more, and then we see if we can make sense of that, because this is, you get a third knight now. The Knight of Pentacles and the 3 of Pentacles. Bottom of the deck, the Page of Wands. Wow. Okay, so let's just unpack this. So you might have done heavy shadow work, and the devil is that energy that is always trying to entangle us in our own shadow aspects. So whatever we can't own up to, whatever guilt, fear, shame related aspects that are in our psyche, in our consciousness, the devil is trying to play us on them. It's trying to, chain us to that. If you're constantly living in guilt, fear, shame, for example, I'm gay, for example, if you live in a society that puts gay people down, if there's no legal protection, for example, if you can lose your job, if you can lose your apartment, things like that, right? So if you are in a country, in a society that suppresses being gay, for example, right? That is a very toxic situation, right? So narcissistic, toxic, antagonistic people can easily play you. You're kind of easily blackmailed. So, you live in guilt, fear, shame. You have to hide an aspect of yourself. Why? Because you can't live that openly. You can't make a YouTube video and say, hey, I'm gay, what the F, right? If you're in a repressive regime, in an authoritarian state, darker aspects have it much easier to bring you into a situation where you can't do much, right? And you have to protect yourself. You have to insulate yourself, maybe even isolate yourself. You have to be very careful who you show your true being, right? where you can show your true being. In an open, democratic, pluralistic democracy, we have achieved a situation where we can show up as who we truly are. Because the structure, the system that we live in, is not supporting guilt, fear, shame as a means to suppress and oppress and blackmail and manipulate people. That is the devilish energy. The devilish energy is always trying to play you through guilt, fear, shame, and through guilt, fear, shame, aspects of yourself that you cannot own, that you cannot respect, that you cannot love within yourself. Maybe just because maybe you don't have a problem with being gay, right? Or with being a unicorn or whatever it is that is shunned by society. That changes over time. But, whatever it is, there's always an aspect of guilt, fear, shame that society is trying to negate and punish, right? And whatever that is where the darker frequencies, narcissistic people, antagonistic, toxic people come in, and they have an easy play field to manipulate people. So it's very important that we keep our society open, right? Pluralistic, democratic, state of law, where you are protected to be who you are. So if you kill somebody, you have a reason to be in shame, guilt, fear, right? Then not a devil comes along to manipulate you, but the justice system in a state of law, in a democracy. If you kill somebody, you might feel guilt, fear, shame, right? But rightfully so, because you did something destructive, negation, right? That's the ultimate function of evil. But if you're just gay, if you're just a freaking unicorn, if you're just, not fitting into some narrative that this or this group likes or dislikes, in an open, free, and pluralistic society, that is not a problem. In a suppressive regime, authoritarian regime, where one group dictates what is good and what is not good, where only one truth is accepted as the truth, these negative, toxic, antagonistic tendencies have it very easy to manipulate people through guilt, fear, and shame. And if they get you through guilt, fear, shame, they try to push you into anger and frustration and ultimately hatred. So if you realize that, if you've been through narcissistic abuse, if you know how it works, guilt, fear, shame, manipulation through guilt, fear, shame, right? They take it, they project all sorts of shit that has nothing to do with you and throw it into your face and accuse you of stuff, right? And you're constantly in this energy where you have to defend yourself, and justify yourself. That is narcissistic abuse. And sometimes it's systemic in totalitarian, fundamentalistic regimes, fascist regimes, that's for sure. So if you wake up to that, and if you live in a halfway decent state of law and democracy, you have to own your own shadow, right? You have a choice here to hide yourself, be the wounded warrior and hide yourself, or to stand up for it and say and own your shadow aspect. I mean, if you killed somebody, if you're a mass murderer or something like that, if you did really bad stuff, right? There's a reason, then this is not the devil that is going to get you. This is then the justice system. That's a justice card. There's a justice card in the tarot deck as well. That energy would get you in a state of law. But in a totalitarian, fundamentalistic, fascist regime, it is designed so you live in guilt, fear, shame, not for doing serious crimes, but just for being a little bit different than that norm that is presented to you as the one and only thing and way to be. So instead of accepting that, you're no longer hanging in there. If the circumstances in the country that you live in You have a state of law. You have a halfway functioning justice system. You have certain rights, right? You have free speech. You have, then you have to get out of your shell, not hide you, because if you hide yourself, if you try to, protect yourself by hiding, you're kind of agreeing to that shady aspect, antagonistic aspect, Again, if you did nothing really wrong, you did nothing destructive, you did nothing in the functionality of negation, for example, killing someone or something horrible like that, right? If you're just being yourself, there's no need to hide it, and you have to stand up for that. And if you do, there's the Knight of Swords, there's the Knight of Pentacles, and there's the Knight of Cups. So you're going forward, speaking your truth, even if your voice is shaking, speaking up against narcissistic abuse, speaking up against people who try to shame trip you, guilt trip you, fear trip you into isolation, into self-mockery, and oh, I'm such a sinner, and culpa mea culpa, that's bullshit. That's fascistic, fundamentalistic bullshit. And you're waking up from that, right? And if you have support in your country, state of law, pluralistic democracy, then you have to stand up against that and speak your truth, even if your voice is shaking. At the same time, you need to pay your bills. You need to be practical about something, right? So that's the Knight of Pentacles. And there's the Knight of Cups. You need to do something that is kind of a highest expression of your true self, that you love to do. So you need something that you love to do. You need to speak your truth. And you need to be smart enough to have something to pay your bills, right? You don't want to live on the streets. You need housing. You need good food. So you have to maintain some sort of thing, Pentacles related, reasonable, down-to-earth stuff to pay your bills. If you're coming from a situation where you've been through narcissistic abuse, where somebody tried to play you through guilt, fear, shame, and the devil is always trying to, guilt, fear, shame, then anger and frustration, and ultimately into hatred. That's why it's so super important that we all do shadow work. So we have to deal with our own shadow aspects. There's always something we don't like about ourselves, but we have to look at it, we have to deal with it, because if we don't deal with it, and if we are not making an effort to reintegrate these aspects of ourselves, these darker tendencies, these darker frequencies, narcissistic, antagonistic, toxic people, they will take advantage of that. So shadow work is the best defense against the darkness. So that's a little counterintuitive, right? So you think, okay, so I don't want the darkness, so I just turn on all the lights and just, negate the shadow. I don't want anything to do with my shadow aspects, guilt, fear, shame, right? Oh God, no, I don't want anything of it. But you're offering your shadow. If you do that, if you try to negate an aspect of yourself, you're offering your shadow aspect to these darker frequencies of consciousness, right? Whatever form they take. And to wake up from that and no longer doing that means to come out of your shell, whatever happened, and step back into the world and be yourself wholeheartedly. There's that wonderful James Baldwin quote here. It took me many years of vomiting up all the filth I'd been taught about myself and half believed before I was able to walk upon the earth as though as I had a right to be here. And you have a right to be here. And everybody who's trying to question that is neither democratic nor in any way related or engaged with the divine or something that we could call good or decent, right? If it's all about negation, then that's the functionality of evil. Even if they say they do it to destroy the darkness and evil and the evil people, and we all have to live like them, and otherwise we're all going to go to hell, there's a word for it, I'm not going to use that word, but that is not divine. That is a function of evil. Why? Because it's a function of negation. And there are people out there who are just dumb enough to not know what they're doing, serving that darkness, believing they're doing something in the name of the good, but they're not. And we are beginning to speak up about that. Speak your truth, even if your voice is shaking. You took your time. Maybe you still need time to heal yourself from that narcissistic, psychopathic, antagonistic abuse, right? Where somebody tried to play you into guilt, fear, shame, true guilt, fear, shame, into disowning an aspect of yourself. And I'm assuming you're not a serial killer. This is an empathic channel. This is for empathic, decent human beings. You might be gay. You might be a freaking trans unicorn. You might be this and that. You might be, I don't know, neurodivergent or whatever, not fitting some certain fascist norm. But you know what? It's your fucking right not to fit a fascist norm in a pluralistic, open society. And you take that right and express that right and not allow these psychopaths to scare you into guilt, fear, shame, and negating an aspect of yourself. That would be failure, because if you do that, you're offering that negated aspect to the darkness, and the darkness will amplify it, and it's an aspect of your own consciousness, right? And eventually that aspect, it will consume you. That's how they probably became like they are now. They were just consumed by darkness, maybe completely lost in their one-sided madness that they're doing the right thing. But you know what? If you commit crimes in the name of your God, you're not serving the same God that I'm serving. It's not about form, it's about function, and the function of evil is negation. The form of evil is one-sidedness and the extreme. Keep that in mind. It's not about form. It's not about, it's not so much about who you are. It's not at all about who you are, actually. It's about what you do and how you do it. What's your intention behind it? Do you try to negate something? You know? Do you try to negate a pluralistic society and make everybody norm to what you believe people should do or say? That is evil. And we have to speak up against that. And at the same time be super. So that is a strange reading. It's a heavy reading, the Capricorn reading, of course. Sure. You know, Capricorn, my friend. So be practical about it. You need to pay your bill. And with all that passion for justice, right? With all that passion for what is right and decent, with all that passion for integrating your shadow work, you know, just showing up as who you truly are. James Baldwin, it took me many years of vomiting up all the filth I'd been taught about myself and half believed before I was able to walk on the earth as though I had a right to be here. That takes time to get there. And if you arrive there, you have something to say, right? Say that. Whenever you can, say it with love. Again, it's about the intention. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to educate or are you trying to negate? Are you trying to fight someone or are you trying to educate people so they don't fall into the same traps again and again? And I feel like through history, humanity has been falling into that trap of, you know, getting mind fucked into guilt, fear, and shame, into frustration, anger, ultimately into hatred. This is how the darkness recruits people. If you collapse under your shadow, you're one of them. Don't do that. Love yourself, respect yourself. And one aspect is to speak your truth, even if your voice is shaking, but try to speak it in a non-aggressive way. Try to speak it in a constructive way, not to fight, but to educate, to tell your story, to, you know. And at the same time, and it is not, you know, you have to pay your bills and you have to do something, you know. Your truth is one thing. Speaking your truth is part of the healing process. But you have to do something that brings you joy and happiness as well while you're doing it. There is the Knight of Cups. And maybe you can bring that together. There's the Seven of Pentacles. So you planted your seeds. You might already have started to express yourself. You might have already started to speak your truth, even if your voice is shaking. You might have already started to make daily self-love, in the best sense of Philautia, a daily practice. How do you do that? Meditation and breath work. So 10 seconds in, 20 seconds out. If you can do that, try a little, you know, there are apps for that, to visualize your in and out breaths. Find your sweet spot that you can do it for at least 5 or 10 minutes. You shouldn't get dizzy, but 1 in, 2 out. The out breaths 2 times that of the in breaths. That's how you release negativity. So if you've been through that, which is antagonistic, narcissistic, toxic abuse, if you've been through that, you need to heal that, and you need to release a lot of negativity through breath work. 1 in, 2 out every freaking day, just like a workout for your consciousness to release negativity. And then combine that with meditation to cultivate self-awareness, to cultivate mindfulness, so that you're not accidentally stumbling into either guilt, fear, shame, back into that mindfuck energy, you know, or you shouldn't get too passionate about it so that you get into rage and anger and hatred. That is ultimately the failure. If you go there, you're going to the darkness. So not hatred is not the goal. So you can, and this is the challenge, to speak your truth with love, really. And to do that, you need a practice for that. And the practice for that is meditation and breath work. Combine those two, 10 minutes each if you can do it, 5 minutes each if you've never done it, half an hour each if you know what you're doing. You transform your life, and you're vomiting up all the filth that has been taught to you and that you might have half believed. And then eventually you are able to walk the earth because you have a right to be here, you know. And I'm not talking about serial killers or rapists or something like that. These people might collapse under their shadow because that's a very heavy shadow. But if it's just you being a little weird, you being neurodivergent, or, you know, just a freak, and in the best way, and creative, all that creative potential that comes with that, that is your divine right to be, and you claim that right? And therefore you need to stand up for yourself, and that is a daily practice. Breathwork and meditation, I tell you that. And so there is the Knight of Swords. There is a lot to express. You can do artwork, you can do whatever it needs, whatever outlet it finds, express it, bring it out. It needs to get out in a way, okay? And then be practical about it. There is the Page of Pentacles, and do something that you love. So if you express trauma, if you express, if you process something connected to trauma, narcissistic abuse, things like that, sometimes that is work, but necessary work. You start with meditation and breathwork, and then you just speak your truth. Express your truth in whatever way. You can crochet, you can, I don't know, do whatever it is that makes sense for you. Paint a picture, or I don't know, write a book, but you don't need to be grandiose about it. It can just be whatever it is, right? But do something that expresses that gives that a form. You need to pay your bills, and apart from that, which is kind of still shadow and healing work, do something that you just love to do. Just love to do. And if you combine, if you find a way to combine that in whatever way, to allow your work being informed by that new honesty, by that new self-esteem that you might have developed through that dark night of the soul. Speaking your truth, you can practice that at work carefully, right? I'm not trying to tell you to tell your boss that she is an asshole, but, be smart about it, but you can stand up for yourself. And when you learn how to stand up for yourself, and you learn how to speak your truth, even if your voice is shaking, that is not just something you do. You can do that through writing it down, to expressing it in whatever forms, but it will also inform the way you work, the way you relate to people, the way you show up in the world. And make sure that the end game is to overcome that drama, right? Trauma, maybe even, and come back to a state of joyful, loving creation. That's the Knight of Cups. And if you are in that, I feel like you already identified what that could be for you. Do you give that loving attention? There's the Three of Pentacles, the Seven of Pentacles, the Ten of Pentacles, and the Star card. This is your happy ending, right? But you have to it is an ongoing process, right? It is an ongoing process. Meditation and breathwork is really what I recommend every freaking day. And then joyful, loving creation and speaking your truth, and some practicality about paying your bills, right? And if you just keep doing that, which is easier said than done, right? And I can't tell you how it looks for you specifically in your life. But you have to pay your bills, you have to speak your truth, stand up for yourself, and you have to do something that you love to do just for the sheer fun of it, just because you enjoy it while you're doing it. If you do these three things, be smart about to pay your bills, speak your fucking truth, even if your voice shakes, stand up for yourself, and do something that you love. If you can combine these three things in whatever way it looks in your specific life. And I feel like the initial stages are already there. There's the Seven of Pentacles, and there's help, there is support with the Three of Pentacles, and that's how it ends. You're coming from Devil and the Hanged Man, my friend. That's pretty heavy stuff, right? But look where you're going. That's the Ten of Pentacles and the Star card. And maybe, just maybe, the Star card is always the Star card is this ambivalent energy where you get something that you might have asked for. So if you ask for happiness, the universe will expose to you all the sources of unhappiness in your life that you need to get rid of and that you need to solve. Can you reintegrate them? Do you have to negate them? Do you have to get rid of toxic, narcissistic people in your life? If you want to be happy, right? If the universe, you ask the universe for happiness, the first thing the universe does is to show you the devil. Because the devil in your life, the narcissistic, antagonistic, toxic energies in your life, prevent your happiness. So if you pray for happiness, the universe will always, the first thing, it's like the blessing and the curse, right? When you get the curse first, if you ask for a blessing, you get the curse first. because it's a freaking duality. It's not just one side of it, you know? It's duality. You get the curse first, and then you get the blessing, and then you're really blessed. Those who get the blessing first, and they get the curse later, and then they're really cursed. So if you ask the universe for happiness, and the universe is delivering that, there's your 10 of Pentacles. Your fortune after difficulty, vast abundance and prosperity, true speaking your truth, doing what you love, and paying your bills. So there's some work involved, of course, right? There's a lot of Pentacles energy here, but you're already on the right course. You're already doing that. You already came out of that, right? And to finish that sentence, right? If you ask the universe for happiness, the universe will show you what prevents your happiness. And that means to go into the shadow first, right? The shadow is overshadowing your life, preventing you from being happy. If you ask for happiness, then the universe will show you the shadow. And then you have to tidy up that shadow. If they're antagonistic, toxic, narcissistic people who sabotage your life, then they have to go. Right? Kick them out of your life. If you have a toxic job, boss, whatever, whether it's a relationship, whether it's in family, whether it's this or that, right? You have to tidy that up. Whether it is an aspect of yourself, whether it's guilt, fear, shame, whether it's internalized homophobia, whether it's internalized transphobia, whether it's internalized what the F, phobia or shame or guilt or whatever, you have to deal with that because it's preventing you from being happy. And if you ask the universe for happiness, you get your happiness, but you have to do your homework first. First the curse, then the blessing. And the curse is to deal with your shadow. And there are a lot of people who can't do that. And they're not going into a good future. So, meditation and breathwork, my dear Capricorn. And I think you're Capricorn, right? You're Capricorn. You're Capricorn, you know how to deal with your shadow aspect. That is pretty much your biggest talent, Capricorn, baby. Right? So, yeah. Tower. King of Pentacles. Are you kidding me? King of Pentacles. Look at that. Beautiful. You got the King of Pentacles and the 10 of Pentacles now. You got everything. The page is here as well. The page of Pentacles, the Knight of Pentacles, the 7 of Pentacles, the 3 of Pentacles, King of Pentacles, the 10 of Pentacles. Pentacles, you know, it is a coin, just for your information, right? Love yourself. Love yourself with the shadow. The Chariot is here. If you just keep your course, self-love as a daily practice, meditation and breathwork, negative breathing, 1 in, 2 out, you're releasing negativity, combining that with meditation, that's your spiritual dojo that you're training in every freaking day. And then you can deal with all the, oh, that weird porn that you watched 10 years ago, guilt, fear, shame. You know? No, not today, right? So if you learn how to love yourself, not just the lovey-dovey part, not just the things that you're proud of, especially the things that are connected to guilt, fear, shame, if you can transcend and integrate them, if you can, for free, sit for half an hour in silence with yourself, you know your shadow. Because your shadow is going to poke you if you sit there for half an hour. If you can sit for, that's what prevents people from meditating. Standing themselves, right? Sitting with themselves in silence for 3 minutes. There are billions of people on this planet who cannot do that. Why? Because they have not yet integrated your shadow. Shadow work, my dear. If you want the light, if you want the star card, do some shadow work. If you want to be happy, deal with that, what makes you unhappy. Because only if you deal with that, you get rid of it, you transcend and integrate it, you heal it, you transform it, and you get your happiness. Negation doesn't work. Negation is the game of the darkness. And that's the big fat lie all these one-sided thinkers told us, whether they are ignorant or stupid or maybe even evil. Who knows why they told us that, but it doesn't work. Negation is always leading into the darkness. Focus not on guilt, right? We're not playing the game, the blame game, right? We're not playing the blame game. We're not trying to identify those who are guilty and take revenge. That's not what we're doing. We're trying to take responsibility for our own frequency and work with our own consciousness. And the goal is joyful loving creation, abundance, happiness, right? Focus not on guilt, but on responsibility. And I might add, guilt is always, that concept of guilt and forgiveness. I'm a Buddhist and I focus on the present, not so much on the past. If you learn from the past, you can study the past. If you want to make a good plan, you have to think about the future, sure. But all we got is the present moment, and all that you can do in the present moment is to take responsibility for your own life, not find someone to blame. That is trying to negate something, right? Externalizing it, negate it, fight it there. That's not solving any problem. No quote here, okay. The universe is conscious. It's all energy, and energy is transformed to frequency. So you transform all that stuff here and you heal it, not by trying to find someone who is to blame or who is guilty of something, right? Go for justice, but not for revenge. But the most important thing is to take responsibility. It is not about being right. It is not about, giving it back to someone, taking revenge, things like that. It is about you finding a path back to happiness and joy and just expressing your highest self. For that, you have to speak your truth. For that, you have to be practical enough to be able to pay your bills. But by all means, the ultimate goal is to combine that in joyful loving creation. And boy, oh boy, is that star card connected to Pentacles energy, right? So that's a beautiful reading. It's a very heavy reading, and it's probably a reading that goes back, it takes into consideration or picks up the energies of the last 9-year, 10-year cycle. It's usually a 9-year cycle, maybe since 2008, but certainly it went probably pretty dark if you're resonating with this reading in the last 9 years. So this chapter, this cycle is over in 2026, especially the second half. Check out the second half, 2026 fall and winter reading. I'm going to link that at the end of this reading. Especially in the second half, we're finally going into Pluto, fully in Pluto in Aquarius. So it's about, we're coming from Pluto in Capricorn, right? So it's so much more nicer. And embrace that. Okay, now I'm shutting up. There's so much here, so much information. Beautiful. It's heavy, it's intense, right? Angel Song, number 17. I think that's even a little darker. Lost and Found. You have followed the script perfectly, taken all the necessary steps and done all the right things. You have put a lot of effort into getting where you are. But as you approach the final stretch, your original desire no longer seems to matter. You feel as though you have lost your way. It no longer feels right. Yet know that nothing you have done is a mistake. All is worthwhile and will eventually serve a purpose. You will rediscover the right path for you, and it will lead you to a golden future. Let it all go for a while. The right path will become obvious in time. Not so much through rational thought and analysis, but through a feeling in your heart, joyful, loving creation. For a long time, you have been guided by what you thought you should do. Pluto in Capricorn since 2008. For a long time, you have been guided by what you thought you should do. Now, Pluto in Aquarius, is the time to be guided by your heart, joyful love and creation. Love will guide you to what you love. Right? And you don't want to be angry and frustrated and looking for people to blame and taking revenge. You want joyful loving creation. You want to heal yourself. You want to stand in your light and in your abundance. And that's what is coming. That is totally what is coming. And remember the Star card. The Star card is a wish fulfilled, a wish granted from the universe. And there's a reason why this lady has 2 cups, pouring one in water, one on the earth. So if you ask for happiness, the universe will answer that. If you truly, truly love, ask for happiness, the universe will show you the shadow, show you that which causes darkness and unhappiness in your life, and then asks you to deal with it. Because the universe is not just handing you, everybody gets a car. No, that's not how it works in the universe usually. But you have to take responsibility. And if there are toxic narcissistic people, if there used to be toxic narcissistic people, hopefully it is in the past with the Hanged Man and having his enlightenment, and you already stepping out of your 9 of Wands wounded warrior mode, it's over, probably, most likely. Think back in the last 9 years. What did you do? Make a list, write it down. How many toxic people did you kick out of your life? How many things, shadow aspect of yourself, did you reintegrate and heal? How did you learn to love yourself, show up for yourself? That is the work. And it seems like you did it. Pluto in Capricorn, that's since 2008, used to be, now it's Pluto in Aquarius. And that you, Capricorn, you feel that very strongly. Because you are you're the ultimate shadow worker, I would say. And that's your reading. Share, like, subscribe, leave a comment, let me know what you think about it. It was super intense. I hope it resonated with you. Let me know, and check out the fall and winter reading, second half of 2026. There's also a 2026 reading at the end of the year. Just check it out. Sun, Moon, Rising if you want the full picture. Now, goodbye. Ciao.